Hi there, welcome to Algebra 2. In this video, we're going to review for the Unit 1 test. Now we can solve proportions by cross-multiplying, but if you look at this fraction here, you can see that we can simplify this fraction a little bit first, and that might make it a little easier. You can see that 24 is divisible by 6, and so is 18. So this will reduce to, say, 6 goes into 24 4 times, and 6 goes into 18 3 times. So what we end up is 4 over 3 equals 5 over x. And now we can cross multiply. 4 times x is 4x. 3 times 5 is 15. And now if we divide both sides by 4, we get x equals 15 over 4, which is D. If 5 pounds of dog food costs $10.65, how much will 8 pounds of dog food cost? Well, there's two ways you can set up a proportion with this situation. You can say 5 pounds to 8 pounds is going to equal $10.65 to the price of 8 pounds. Or you could say 5 pounds to the price of 5 pounds equals 8 pounds to the price of 8 pounds. And if you look, when you cross multiply either one of these, you're going to get the same thing. 5 times x equals 8 times 10.65. And that's 85.2. Then we'll divide both sides by 5. And we get x equals 17.04. For what value of x is the following rational expression undefined? Remember, undefined happens when we divide by 0. So what x value would make this divide by 0? And I think you can see that 7 minus 7 is 0. So that would make the whole value undefined. It would be dividing by 0. What values of x make the following rational expression equal to 0? So a rational expression is equal to 0 on the top equals 0. So what would make this, what x value would make this part 0? Negative 8 plus 8 would be 0. And what x value would make this factor 0? 12 minus 12 is 0. So we want x to be negative 8 and 12. And that's B. Alright, so simplify or reduce the rational expression. So this fraction bar means division. And division can cancel out things that are multiplied. So here I have a 2x plus 3 as a factor on the top, and a 2x plus 3 as a factor on the bottom. 2x plus 3 divided by 2x plus 3 is 1. So those, in a sense, cancel each other out. So we're left with x plus 4 over x minus 2, which is C. Alright, simplify this rational expression. The x plus 5 factors cancel out, and then 2 over 10 will reduce to 1 over 5. So it looks like we're left with 1 over 5 times 3x minus 1. And that's D. Multiply and express the answer in simplest terms. When you're multiplying fractions, you don't have to multiply it together and then simplify. You can look to see what factors are going to cancel out. 12 is 3 times 4, and that means that these 3's are going to cancel out. So what we're left with is 4 times x minus 1 over x plus 2. That's B. When you're dividing rational expressions, all you do is switch it to multiplication by flipping over the second fraction. So 2 times x plus 2 goes on the top, and 12x goes on the bottom, and now we're just going to see what factors cancel out. X plus 2's will cancel out, and then we get 4 times 2 on the top, and then 12 is 4 times 3. So these 4's will cancel out, and we're left with 2 on the top, and on the bottom 3 times x. So that's A. Now when we're adding, we need to get a common denominator. So this denominator doesn't have an x or a factor of 3, so we need to multiply by 3x on the top and the bottom. And this fraction we just need to multiply by 2 on the top and the bottom. So this gives us 2 times 2 is 4 over 6x plus 5 times 3x is 15x over 6x. And then we just, now that we have the same denominator, we can just add the numerators. So we get 15x plus 4 over 6x. Subtracting is similar. We still need to get a common denominator. This denominator is missing a factor of x, and this denominator is missing a factor of x plus 4. So the second fraction gets multiplied by x plus 4, top and bottom, and the first fraction gets multiplied by x on the top and the bottom. So now what we get is 5x minus 2 times x plus 4 over x times x plus 4. And now we need to distribute this negative 2. So 5x minus 2x, and then negative 2 times 4 is minus 8 over x times x plus 4, and that 5x minus 2x is 3x. So 3x minus 8 over x times x plus 4. The following situation, height varies directly with width, so that height is a constant times the width. Find the value of a constant. Well, if I was to take this little equation here and solve for the constant, I would be dividing both sides by the width. So I would get constant equals height over width. So I can just take any one of these points and find my constant by doing the height, which is the y value, over the width, which is the x value. So height over width, 1.2 over 2, or I could do 1.8 over 3, and either one of those I do. 1.2 divided by 2, I get 0.6. 1.8 divided by 3, I get 0.6. So my answer is 0.6. Here my height is a constant divided by the width. So my constant I would get by multiplying both sides by the width. So I get constant equals the width times the height. So I can pick any point and just multiply the width times the height. So 0.5 times 0.4, or 2 times 0.1. Either way, I'm going to get 0.2. In an inverse variation function, what happens to the output when the input is divided by 2? In an inverse variation function, whatever you do to the input, the inverse operation happens to the output. So if the input is divided by 2, the output is going to get multiplied by 2. And just to convince you, I'll make up an inverse variation function. Remember on the last slide it said that an inverse variation function, actually 2 slides ago, an inverse variation function is y equals a constant over x, or the output equals a constant divided by the input. So let's just pick a constant. How about 20? And then I'll pick an x value. When x is 10, what is y? This is my little function. Y equals 20 over 10, y equals 2. Okay, so now if I was to take the input and divide by 2, so 10 divided by 2 is 5. So input, I'm dividing my input by 2. Now what does my output give me? Y equals 20 over, now my input is 5. 20 over 5 is 4. So when my input was divided by 2 to get 5, my output got multiplied by 2 to get 4. Find the values of x for which the graph of f of x has vertical asymptotes. Vertical asymptotes on a graph occur where the graph is undefined. So what we really need to find is the x values where this graph is undefined. And undefined means you have a factor of 0. So what x value would give us a factor of 0 with this factor? It would be when x is 3, because 3 minus 3 is 0. And for this factor it would be negative 7, because negative 7 plus 7 is 0. So my x values are 3 and negative 7. Which function is shown in the graph? Well, we have an asymptote here and an asymptote here. This asymptote is at x equals 3, and this asymptote is at x equals negative 2. So what that tells us is that we need to have 3 needs to make a 0 in the denominator. So look at these. Does 3 make a 0 here? No, that makes 3 plus 3 is 6. Does 3 make a 0 here? Yeah, 3 minus 3 is 0. Here, 3 minus 3 is 0, and here, 3 minus 3 is 0. So we can cross this one off the list, because 3 doesn't make an asymptote here. Does negative 2 make an asymptote? Does negative 2 give us a 0 in the denominator? Negative 2 plus 2 is 0, so it works there. Negative 2 minus 3 is negative 5, so we don't get an asymptote there. And we're not going to get an asymptote here because 3 minus negative 2 is 5. So just based on the asymptotes, we can show that it has to be B. And by the zeros, we can tell that our 0 needs to happen when x equals negative 3, because negative 3 plus 3 is 0. And here you go. At negative 3, you have a 0 of the function, where the function's value is 0. Alright, I'll see you all for the test. Email me if you have any questions. Bye-bye.